Hello and welcome to Two Words Wolves Pod. I'm Ryan Eichten and with me tonight is Leo Sun. Leo, how you doing?
Doing great, man. Happy long weekend. We're just talking offline about it. We both have the day off tomorrow. And I'll say people used to ask me typical icebreaker, team builder, office morale type activities. Was like, well, what's your favorite holiday and why? And I used to always say for the longest time, it was MLK Jr. weekend, like that day. Because like growing up, especially once I was in college, like we didn't have school. It was a state holiday or national holiday. And so the NBA always had like a full slate of games on from the morning, like all the way throughout the night. And I just have like so many fond college memories of just kind of vegging out in my dorm room with no class, just watching my fantasy basketball stats because like almost all the teams are playing. And I just remember like it's just such a good day, like a random early spring semester 3-day weekend and everything like that. But I will say, like now, like I still enjoy it because I'm getting time off work, obviously. But I think, if anything, I've kind of leaned towards more into what it actually means. Like, what does MLK Jr. Day actually stand for, and about Black rights and just social rights in general, human rights. And remembering that, like, there's hope that there could still be progress made. I think that's something that me and my wife, we talk about that a lot. Just on MLK Jr. Day, we'll try to go to like a Black owned restaurant to support them. And especially given the times that we're in, I feel like it is important to reflect and understand that, there is, advancement in that. So we have that. By the time you're listening to this, it is probably MLK Jr. Day. And yes, I still try and watch basketball all day. But yeah, so I'm pumped about that, man. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, in that same vein, Minneapolis still going through it with the ice presence here locally. We're hoping start to get better. Obviously, the worries are there's a lot of worst case scenario worries that we hope to avoid. People have kept it peaceful while also expressing their their views of the rough situation. So,
Yeah.
yeah, but it just hoping for the best in that sense, and like you said, trying to enjoy the day off work tomorrow for MLK Day, and there looks like there's 9 games on tomorrow. Wolves are not one of them. Next game is on Tuesday for them, so yeah, just kind of a complete day off on the schedule, which isn't a bad thing at all. But we can just jump straight into the meat of the pod, and we'll talk about on Saturday the Spurs. The Wolves versus Spurs. It ended up being the Wolves' second straight loss. They were down by 25 points at halftime. And kind of similar to the win against the Spurs from the week prior. The Wolves come storming back, and there's only one place to start this podcast, and it's with Anthony Edwards, who had a career high 55 points, 19 of 33 shooting, 9 3-pointers, was just sensational. Obviously the career high, best scoring output of his career to this point. And to me, the biggest takeaway, and it's just very clear, one of the biggest things, if not the biggest reasons the Wolves have failed to make the finals after making the West Finals each of the past 2 seasons, is they just, in those series, they didn't get enough from Anthony Edwards. And he pretty much in every playoff series in his NBA career has been sensational. And he wasn't necessarily bad in those series, but just wasn't. He got outplayed by Luka in the Mavs series, and got outplayed by SGA in last year's West Finals. And either this year, for them to make the finals, either he's gonna have to outplay those type of guys or play at least toe to toe with them. Unlike the past 2 series. And this game against the Spurs, I just think is a indication that the past couple seasons, and has finished second team All NBA and has been closer to that level than like the true MVP conversation. And I really think he's leveling up into like the MVP type guy, which is who the Wolves need him to be. To me, he's kind of entering that zone of like the top 4 guys in the league this year have been Luka, Giannis, SGA, and Jokic. And I think he's entering, well, he's still probably behind. Certainly, I think the top 3, and probably Giannis, probably all 4 of those still like a half step behind him. I think he's kind of putting a distance, how he's played, between him and the next level of guys like Maxey and Cade Cunningham and all those guys that'll end up finishing in one of the top 2 All NBA teams. I think that's like, we'll talk about like the actual meat of the game, or certainly the down the stretch play, but like before even talking about that, just the way Ant is playing and the clear ceiling that he can reach, like there's not much else to say. The Wolves need him to be that type of guy, and he's, despite the loss, he showed it against the Spurs.
Yeah, I think it's also noteworthy that this is his first game back after missing the last two with a nagging toe injury. And granted, this isn't something that's super. I mean, hopefully, knock on wood, it's not something that's super serious or should linger a long time. But clearly, it's something that's been hampering him for a little bit. This isn't just like, oh, he got some rest. He's actually dealing with the thing, and the fact that he can bounce right back in. I mean, if you kind of go back and look at that first game, he came back after missing a string of games against the Knicks back in December, I think it was. You know, he kind of struggled. I mean, he got going later, but he kind of struggled to get going. But I mean, he was on it just right from the get go. He was super aggressive. In my notes in that Spurs game, I put looked like he came out with like a chip on his shoulder a little bit. I mean, he got teed up, which again I think is a ridiculous technical that he got in that first quarter by I think it's like Ref Duffy, whatever his name was. But Ant was like in it, like after every shot, he was kind of chirping away, and yeah, he was locked in, you know, from first quarter all the way down to the fourth. And I think it's something that there's an anecdote that I want to share is that my middle brother, he is not really into sports much at all. I mean, he'll know who like the superstar players are. He knows who LeBron James is, but he knows pretty much nothing about basketball, and let alone the NBA. And so occasionally he'll watch some Timberwolves games with me out of solidarity, kind of like, all right, like you know, all right, oh, you got a Wolves game on, all right, cool. Who's playing? Is Cat still on the team? I'm like, no, you got traded a while ago. But when he was visiting me yesterday, you know, on Saturday. 2 days ago, if you're listening to this on Monday, I had the Spurs game on. I was covering it for Candace Hoopus. And as he watched that game with me in the fourth quarter, when he was just going off and hitting these, you know, these pull up triples and like just, you know, all these crazy shots, he had just like a visceral reaction like, damn, dude, like that's crazy. Like, is he really that good? And I was like, he's really that good. Like, this is not just like oh, this is the best game of his life. I mean, yes, it was his best game points wise, but like all season we've seen. I mean, like even in the Nuggets game, I mean, he's just a crazy shot maker. He's reading the situations correctly, like you said, he is evolving. But I think my brother's like reaction to Ant's play late in the game is representative of what general sports fans and just general people, population in general, feel about Anthony Edwards when they watch him play. Like he's beginning to transcend just the general NBA fan base knowledge, and I feel like he's starting to creep into that general cultural relevancy just like Wemby is. It's like, dude, there's this crazy 7'6" guy. You know, he could do everything. And then now there's like, oh, dude, there's this guy who's like super talented in terms of he's athletic. He can make shots. He's got the personality. Like his teams are winning. Like Ant is crossing over into that. And I think it's just been so crazy. And I definitely don't take it for granted in terms of, you know, what it means for not just Minnesota sports, but what it means to have someone like him be able to watch him and root for him to be like, hey, he's on my team. Like how rare that actually is. Obviously, we had it with Kevin Garnett, but I mean, even between then, I mean, like there's players that were very good, but not anyone like this. And the Wolves happen to be blessed with one of them right now, and it's just so crazy to watch every game because you know that this is coming, like you know, more times than not.
Yeah, and you talk about, I said this when I was out in Atlanta and Miami. You talk about just like opposing fans' reaction to Ants. I just saw so many fans where it was clearly like a family, where half the family was wearing either Heat or Hawks gear, and the other half was wearing Anthony Edwards jerseys, which was just like I when I saw the Minnesota stuff, I was, oh, there's some Minnesotans over there, and then the rest of the family walk up and was like, oh no, those are locals that that like Ant, just how popular Ant has like converted these kids into being, they may not be Timberwolves fans outright, but like they're fans of Anthony Edwards. So like in terms of that, Ant has like crossed that Rubicon. But I did look up a stat, and I said this kind of in the offseason. I did bring up in the offseason, like they needed Ant to be like first team All NBA MVP caliber to like win the championship. So I did some research. So since 1980, obviously there's been 46 champions since 1980, right? 11 of those, only 11 of those 46 did not have someone on their team make All NBA first team that year. So what 34 out of 45, someone on that championship team made first team All NBA that year. Of those 11 that didn't, 8 had a former MVP on the team. So like a good example of this would be the 2023 Nuggets. Embiid was, because of the positioning, Embiid made first team and won MVP, and Jokic was second team. So that was, the Nuggets were one of my 11 teams. Well, Jokic won the last 2 MVPs. And so there's a lot of teams like this. The 2022 Warriors, Steph was on second team. Well, Steph won multiple MVPs before that. Excuse me, it's 7 teams. I misread my stat. Kawhi Leonard did not win an MVP, but he finished top 3. And the 3 full outliers of the last 46 champions that didn't have either first team All NBA player, a former MVP, or someone who finished top 3. So this is only 3 out of 46 teams. They're all Detroit Pistons teams. They're the 3 Detroit Pistons champions. 2 of those teams had Isaiah Thomas, who had previously made All NBA first team 3 separate times. So he had proven to be like a top 5 player in the league. Isaiah Thomas from the 90s. And then the last team, this is always the outlier whenever the 2004 Pistons are always the outlier when you pull any of these stats.
Right.
the 4 Pistons always come up. So that said, to me, you can pull a lot of these stats. Obviously, a team outside of the top 3 seeds has never won the championship. I believe that's true. And like, really, the only time a team makes it that far is when, like the 99 Knicks made the finals. Well, that was a shortened strike season. You basically need a guy to make All NBA first team. It's more or less a requirement to win the title, is to have a guy that either made All NBA first team or did it in the past. Obviously, Ant's been second team. And so that's why, to me, this is so important from Ant. Because if he keeps playing like this, he's going to make All NBA first team. Part of that is Nikola Jokic won't play enough games, and so there's an open slot. But still, Ant needs to. You basically got to play like one of the 5 best players in the league to win the title. It's more or less non-negotiable, and maybe in the future that won't be the case anymore. But for now, because like even a good example of this, like the Celtics with Jason Tatum. Tatum is not like had not been like an MVP caliber player, but he had made first team All NBA pretty consistently leading up to that title. And like, so that to me, I guess, what do you make of my stat that I'm pulling out here? Do you think does Ant need to make All NBA first team for the Wolves to like jump into like true championship contender status?
I think it's maybe less to do with the actual statistic of him making first team yields this, but just more of like what does it mean if Anthony Edwards made All NBA first team? Then that means that he's continued to play at the level that he's playing right now, and the Wolves are having success, even better rate of success than they're having right now. And so I think if he wins first team All NBA, then that means that Ant is playing well, and that also means that the Wolves are playing well. And I think that itself would be like enough to tell me that, okay, yeah, well then, the Wolves should have a shot at winning the championship then if he does make that first team All NBA. So yeah, I think that's interesting. There's always going to be outliers to numbers. It's not perfect. There's no catch all for that. But yeah, I think that's pretty interesting for sure.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Is that it's a little bit like it's a little bit arbitrary. A good example of this would be like the 1982 Lakers. Magic Johnson finished second team that year. It's like, well, and the Jokic example, it's like, yeah, they happen to finish second team, but like those are obviously like one of the Jokic and Magic are like 2 of the whatever best players in the history of the basketball. So um I pull the stat up knowing it's like slightly arbitrary, but I do think it's like a good measure. Like you need a guy to just be otherworldly, and to this point, Ant has just been like a step behind that in his career, and that makes sense given he was 23 last year, right? And it's only what 24 now, or 22, 23. But the way he played in that Spurs game, and you hope he can find a little bit more health down the stretch of the second half of the season, because like, to be honest, and if he keeps playing at if he misses as many games in the second half as he did in the first half, he won't be eligible for All NBA. The shooting skills from him, which were like the biggest thing worrying him coming out of the draft, he's just making everything from everywhere. The 3-point shooting is ungodly. Like, basically, I mean, he's gonna like, at this pace of his career, he's gonna break every non-Curry 3-point record. Like, he's been that good. The mid-range shooting has just been incredible. We saw that in the Spurs game, and I think that's important too. Even as like, I think myself and maybe you too were worried about that. Like, the mid-range volume going up wasn't necessarily something we wanted to see, but especially against a guy like Wemby, that may be the only shot you get, right? Like, he had a beautiful one, like a couple, like he had like a spinning little twirl right
Yeah,
into a
first
mid-range
half.
jumper
Yeah.
in the first half, like just incredible. I'm almost out of words for how good he was in that Spurs game. It's too bad that they I guess maybe I'll do my good on my soapbox here. 22 and a half hours between games is just like unacceptable. That's crap. You should not, if you're going to play a back to back, you should have 24 hours or more between games. 22 and a half hours with with travel in between is just, do you care about your product? Do you care? Because I think the Wolves win this game if this is not a back to back. They lost right. What are the two main stretches they lost at the end of the first half and down the stretch of the game? Wouldn't those be the two stretches of games that would be impacted by? I just playing it. I looked up. They were down 25, and I looked at my phone, and they were still not 24 hours within the tip of the last game. They had played a game and a half of NBA basketball within a 24-hour period. Like that. Wolves Spurs, the two games that Wemby has played against the Wolves, have been two of the better games in the NBA this season. And so the fact that one of them was even slightly diminished because of a back-to-back, who knows? Maybe Rudy plays. Maybe Rudy plays in the game if it wasn't this quick turnaround. That was my one frustration of the game, is I just hate it's all because of the TV money. The Wolves would have been playing at 7:00 in Houston if not for the national TV game. So that's my soapbox, that I'm frustrated. I mean, I guess the other one is do we want to talk about the missed call at the NBA at the end of the game too? That might have cost them the game.
Yeah, if in case you didn't see it, it was circling social media timelines. In the last 2-minute report, there was the block that Victor Wembanyama was accredited on Joan Beringer that would have put the Wolves in the lead with, I think it was less than 30 seconds left or so. And it was actually ruled an incorrect no call, that Wemby actually bumped him with his body before blocking the shot. And so people put it up to video, and very clearly Victor Wembanyama is shuffling to his right as Joan Beringer is kind of cutting under the rim baseline, bumps him with the body and then blocks him afterwards. And so, it is one of those frustrating things. I don't want to say the Wolves got, hosed by the refs, in that game, but it is frustrating though. I mean, anytime it's one of those things where you feel like, oh, well, that was kind of out of our hands, but at the same time, that's going to happen. And there was also another graphic I saw circling around, and I forget which podcast. I apologize. There's a podcast I was talking about this, that of all the teams that have been given missed calls in the last 2-minute reports in the last, I think it was 3 or 4 years, the Wolves were on the receiving end of the most incorrect calls or no calls that should have been calls of at all 30 teams. And again, I know, I get it. I'm not in Minnesota per se, but I am a Minnesota sports fan as the Timberwolves, and I get that there's that vibe of we're the victim. They're always picking on us, kind of thing. But it just hurts to know that the numbers do seem to match it in terms of the end of the game calls there. So it's frustrating, but yeah, I do agree with you. I mean, his Ant continues to play well. I mean, even despite coming back from injury and playing on the back-to-back. I mean, yes, he didn't play in the Houston game, but he was still traveling and he was still adjusting his schedule at a different rate that he would have been at a normal time if it wasn't a back-to-back. I mean, he was impacted by that for sure too. So yeah, all in all, it was a very, very exciting game. But it was unfortunate for Wolves fan that ended where it did. But I feel like the general consensus of that Wolves loss against the Spurs is that it's okay. It's all right. It's understandable. There's all these things. We'll get more into that later on. But there were a lot of factors against the Wolves on that, and yet they still made it into a game, and they were an incorrect call, potentially incorrect call away from winning the game. So
yeah, and it's not something I'm gonna rail about. It's just you got unlucky. One of the missed calls. So the Wolves were down 1. If the correct call had been made, Beringer goes to the line for 2 free throws. You'd expect him to either tie the game or take the lead with that. And instead, the Spurs hit what ends up being the game-winning 3-pointer on the other end. Unfortunate, but I'm sure you can go back and find a different call that helped the Wolves or whatever. But yeah, just kind of a bummer there. But like you mentioned, just an incredibly fun game. All 3 Spurs games that they've played, the first one even when Wemby was out, just incredible games. And I think if this were a playoff series, I think it'd be incredibly, incredibly fun. I think you'd hope it'd be in the second round. I think that'd be the
right.
hope. Whatever. I mean, if the Wolves get to the second round, whoever they play is just going to be an absolute. It's almost like you're past. Who do you want to play at that point? You're going to play a monster. The Final Four of the West is just going to be, and it's going to be funny because one of the East matchups is just going to be like a cupcake. It's going to be the difference between. If the Wolves and Pistons switch spots, the Wolves will be favorites to win the East by a healthy margin. It's so funny. All right, let's briefly talk about the game the night before against the Houston Rockets, in which Ant didn't play, and I guess I'll combine this too. Um, in the Spurs game, they got rotation minutes from Johnny Juzang, your guy, and Leonard Miller. I mean, it's not to come down to those guys. Like they played fine in the 10 minutes combined they were out there, but like the Wolves were with with Gobert out, with Nas getting hurt during the game, and with Beringer fouling out. Like the Wolves were in a tough spot rotation wise. If that game had gone to overtime, who knows what the heck would have happened? But yeah, against the Rockets, Wolves lose by 5. Had a double digit lead in the first half. Rockets tied up by the early second half, and then in a close game entering the fourth quarter, the Wolves just like their offense kind of fell apart in the fourth quarter, and kind of went down in a loss for that one. To me, like that's just kind of pretty simple. You watch what Ant did against the Spurs, and they didn't have him against Houston. You'd imagine if Ant played in that Houston game, they would have won. Um, yeah, like I know a lot of the talk was about the free throws. My thing on that was like they shot the two teams shot almost the exact same free throw numbers. I was kind of weirded out why people were so focused on that because it was like the Wolves shot 20 of 35 and Houston shot 20 of 34. Sure, if the Wolves make a couple extra, do they win the game? Sure. But like the same applies to the Rockets then. And the other part was like for both teams, the bad free throw shooting was coming from two guys. For the Wolves, it was just Rudy who shot 2 of 10. Randall is 9 of 11. That's pretty darn good. Jaden 4 of 5. Solid enough. Mike 1 of 2. Not a good percentage, but low sample, obviously. Nas 4 of 5. Solid enough. It was just Rudy's 2 of 10. And that's obviously you'd like that to be at least like 5 of 10, 6 of 10. But like, I don't know, your worst free throw shooter had a bad free throw shooting night. I don't think that's cause for their concern. And the Rockets were the same thing. All their guys shot well from the free throw line. Alperen Şengün is 3 of 9. I don't know. I thought the focus on the free throw shooting was a little weird. Obviously, it did cost them, but it cost both teams. But they had a bunch of fourth quarter turnovers that prevented them from winning the game. And that's kind of what Julius Randle was awesome in the game. 39 points. He's averaging like almost 30 points in the games Ant misses, which is fantastic. But it also kind of comes with for Randle 2 assists, 5 turnovers. Scoring was awesome, but that's usually an indicator for how effective Randall's playing is that assist to turnover ratio. And it unfortunately was negative in that game, while also pointing out like the Wolves get ripped apart if Randall doesn't play like he did.
Yeah, I mean, that Rockets game, I feel like it was a game that I walked away feeling like I feel like I have more thoughts about the Rockets than I did about the Wolves.
Mhm.
Obviously, the Wolves are missing, yeah, their best player, and yada yada yada. I get that, but just talking about the Rockets just for 1 minute here, their offense just looks like a horrendous mess out there,
Yeah.
and that's despite having two primarily one-way superstars in Kevin Durant and Alperen Şengün that should be offensive hubs. I know Şengün's still working his way back slowly from injury. He's played a handful of games now, and obviously did have a great game, especially from the stripe, like you mentioned. But when looking at the Rockets offense, I mean, in 2026, they played 10 games and they are 14th in offensive rating right now, which doesn't sound that bad. But for a team that a lot of people, again, I've said this a lot on social media, they paint them as contenders. The Rockets are going to be up there with the Nuggets and the Thunder, blah, blah, blah. That right now in 2026, they're bottom 5 in the league of all 30 teams, including the East, bottom 5 in 3-pointers made and 3-point percentage. They're dead last of all 30 teams in assist percentage in 2026. And so they rely so badly on offensive rebounding, which they rank first in. Everyone knows that they're big. Steven Adams, Alperen Şengün, Amin Thompson, they crash the boards really strong. But the Rockets did play the Pelicans today, and it looks like they lost Steven Adams for a significant amount of time. He had a really brutal looking leg injury where, everyone knows Steven Adams is, strongest guy in the NBA, or he has that reputation. But he went down in a heap, and he looked like he was almost crying on the floor. They went over to try and check him out. I don't know what the formal diagnosis is. He tried to kind of hobble off on his own, but he could not put a single inch of weight on it. It looked like it was a knee or ankle or something. So prayers up for Steven Adams. But despite the fact that he is one of their older veteran dudes, he does play a huge part, for their team. I think that was obvious even in the Wolves game. They really missed Steven Adams in the paint, for that game. And so I just don't see it with the Rockets. I mean, David Jacoby and Chris Vernon, they have a podcast I was listening to recently earlier this week, and they made a really good point. They said that the current Houston Rockets team in 2026 on offense feels a lot like the Kevin Durant Phoenix Suns. And it's a little bit similar. It's like, oh yeah, KD's scoring these great games, and no one can stop him. And oh, Devin Booker's great. In this case, Alperen Sengun, he's having an all-star campaign type of year. But yet their offense is still such a mess. And so I don't know if just getting Fred VanVleet back is going to solve everything. Obviously, he's going to help. But I don't know if adding him in is going to help, their defense, which is their strong point. Adding an older guy coming off an injury into the starting lineup playing significant minutes. So, honestly, took KD having his season best game for them to take down the Wolves, who are missing their, KD, for all intents and purposes. And so, yeah, didn't feel too bad about the Wolves overall. It's more concerns about the Rockets, where I wouldn't go so far as to say, oh, I think they're an easy matchup for the Wolves in the playoffs if they match up. But it's not a team that I think is like a upper echelon contending team to me, not as they're currently constructed.
Yeah, I've been surprised on just the lack of respect nationally for the Wolves. And to me, it comes more from maybe the casual setting, weirdly. Because if you listen to different hardcore NBA podcasts, I think the Wolves do get that respect. And so I just pulled up the sports books NBA title odds, and not surprisingly, Oklahoma City first, Denver second, got no problem there. Third is the Spurs, and to me at plus 1,200, so 12-1, I think that's incredibly too favorable to the Spurs. I think they're really, really good, but the idea of them going to the playoffs basically for the first time, with their current set of teams and winning the finals compared to a team like the Wolves, to me is just kind of insane. I don't like the Wolves should have better title odds than the Spurs. I think that's pretty clear. Next is the Knicks, who have lost 8 of their last 10. And again, I go back to the first team All NBA thing I did. I don't think Brunson is a good enough. If Dalen Brunson is your best player, you're gonna have a really hard time winning the title. Historically, that's been true. Maybe the NBA is different now. I guess that'll be the fun of seeing. But
well, Jalen Brunson's making a great case for first team All NBA with the way the Knicks are playing without him right now. So
that's true.
It's kind of a mess over there.
And maybe that's just even that one. Maybe I'm the Knicks are in the easier conference and will have an easier path to the final. Fine, fair enough. Next is the Houston Rockets at plus 1,700, 17-1. Like you said, I think the Wolves have a way better shot of winning the title than the Rockets. The Rockets meet my arbitrary first team All NBA thing with Durant, obviously. If I were to filter out people over the age of X, obviously that changes things. But like you said, they rely a lot on Steven Adams and Kevin Durant. I mean, Durant's a fairly healthy player, but I don't know. I think if they had Fred VanVleet, I would totally agree. They have everything. But I think that Fred VanVleet injury is gigantic for them. They just don't have a point guard. Reed Shepherd's a solid player, obviously, but I think the fact that that game, big picture wise, does not scare me in a Rockets matchup. I mean, again, it's one game sample. Adams didn't play in the game, all that. Next is the Detroit Pistons. Again, the only explanation there is that they're in the Eastern Conference, easier path. I just think the Detroit Pistons have played 6 total playoff games with their current core. They haven't won a playoff series in how long? Since 2010, I think. Why is that team have a better shot than the Wolves? And then this one's just insane. Why do the Boston Celtics have better title odds than the Wolves? That is bonkers, bananas, insane. I get that Tatum could and probably will come back, but they're starting Luka Garza is a big part of their team. I'm sorry, they're not going to win the title. And then the Wolves at 28-1, weirdly ahead of the Lakers, which watch how the Lakers play. They are not better than the Timberwolves, but to me, I think the Wolves have the third best chance to win the title. And I'm kind of going insane. And again, Vegas odds are not necessarily reflective of the general consensus, but it's a good baseline. The Wolves should have the third best title odds, in my opinion. A good gap between them and Denver. But I just think people are sleeping on the Wolves, and I kind of don't understand why. Do you agree with me? Of the teams that are currently, I think we all agree, OKC, Denver should have the best, or the two most likely. But do you agree with me that the Spurs, Knicks, Rockets, Pistons, and Celtics having better odds is kind of insane?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is, and I'm not really into sports betting. I'm not don't know that world that well, but I will say that I think a lot of it has to do with the conferences. I mean, that one team has to make it out of the East, kind of thing.
Yeah, I'll give that with the Pistons and Knicks. I get that part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, the Celtics thing, yeah, is kind of wild, and the Rockets thing. I feel like, I mean, the point of betting odds and the point of, you know, say the Wolves not getting the respect that they need or certain other teams having, a better odds or whatever the case is, I think it's to get people to bet on that. When you're looking at there's Kevin Durant, all on one team. It's like, oh well, yeah, would you rather pick Kevin Durant or a team with second best player is Julius Randle? Where people are gonna be like, oh, I don't want to bet on Julius Randle. I think Anthony Edwards alone, kind of going back to our earlier topic, will change that. I think as he continues to play the way that he's playing, those odds will shift. But yeah, I mean, it is a thing where the Wolves are going to get disrespected. And I think they talked about that. Alan Horton and Jim Peterson, I think they talked about that during the Spurs game where they said that, the Wolves are kind of getting underrated again. I think they were looking at some type of like odds or something like that and how the Wolves are a little bit further down. And Alan said, like, hey, I'm okay with that. And I'm like, I'm with Alan. I'm like, dude, yes, please feel free to disrespect the Wolves like they did in the playoffs last year against the Lakers and, whatever, where it's like, yeah, pick against us. That's fine. The Wolves seem to play a lot better, in my opinion, when people aren't expecting, like, oh, well, they should be beating this team or like, oh, they should be here. And I get trying to earn the respect of the national media. And I think that is coming. I think it's just tough for the Wolves where a lot of people still maybe connect the Wolves with their time before Anthony Edwards. Like, oh, well, that team, I mean, they're not a serious team, even though we made two straight Western Conference finals. And so I think it's going to take, decades, if anything, to kind of change that narrative over time where, you're always going to, the Celtics and even the Lakers, sure, they aren't more favored than the Wolves, but they will very easily go on like a 3 or 4 game win streak, and all of a sudden the Lakers are, top 5 or 6 in like NBA championship
Mhm.
odds. Where it's like, oh, it's easy to bet on these franchises per se, and so I think that's part of it. But yes, I do agree with you. Yeah, the Wolves should be top 5 for sure. Probably top 4 in my opinion.
Yeah, and I'll admit it's hard to like compare them with the East versus West just with like the power and balance of the conference, but I don't know. It's them being behind San Antonio and Houston. Watching those last two games, I just that's that's kind of surprising to me. All right, let's move on to kind of some trade discussions. I don't feel like talking about any specific player just because it's so hard to like pinpoint what, but like I've been really thinking a lot about what player archetype, or to connect this what we were just talking about. I think the Wolves should treat this. Obviously, they're not all in, but like the Wolves have a legitimate shot to win the title, and they should treat the deadline as such. And it's not to say you punt on whatever, but like I'm kind of at the point where if Rob's not going to play like at all, they like I said they brought in they brought in Juzang and Leonard Miller before they brought in Rob. Obviously, obviously Lenny plays a different position, but like I think using Rob's $6 million plus like another, either if it's Joe Ingles or Leonard Miller or whoever, and getting like an $8 million player to add to this rotation, I think like almost has to happen. And I get you'd be selling basically low on Rob Dillingham, and it might just be like an expiring player where a team is willing to give up an expiring player for a lottery pick or a lottery ticket, really, in Dillingham. But that's kind of where I'm at. Honestly, if you can, if you found a good trade for a guy that makes closer to like 18 million, you might want to look at trading Mike Conley. I get like the locker room stuff that would cause, and I wouldn't. It'd have to be a perfect fit type of player that you do that for. I would think about it, but let's just assume they don't do that, and we're looking at more of you're trading for like a guy that makes 8-ish million, someone that's going to kind of fill out the back end of the rotation, right? Where Nas and probably Bones are playing somewhat. What type of player do you think they need? Because a month ago, a couple weeks ago, I would have said you need a backup center, and we'll talk how Berenger's been playing, which will be a later topic for us. I don't think that's a player archetype you need. I think if you're looking, because Nas, Rudy, and Randall are going to take a majority of the big minutes, the backup center you'd want is someone like slot in there for like spot minutes. I think Berenger is already like good enough to do that. Um, so that leaves kind of like wing or guard, and is kind of with to lesser extent, does Bones kind of fill in that like spark guard that you already need? So I said this last pod, I'm kind of like, do they more need a wing player as like someone that's like better than Jalen Clark? Um, and I think where I've just kind of landed is just get someone, get a solid, whoever you can get, ideally guard or wing, but like just get another player. I think this rotation needs one more guy that you can put in there and not feel like, okay, what are we going to, is this person really good enough to play in the, like, no, get someone that is clearly like your seventh guy behind Nas. That'd be just, I don't know who it is. Maybe closer to the deadline, we can go search, we can go go look at people that make between like 8.5 million and 7 million or whatever to try to find someone. But that's kind of where I'm at. Where what do you think?
Yeah, I think I agree with you in a sense that position wise, I look at the cap sheet. The way that I view this is based on like, okay, the Wolves clearly are not in the spot where they're in desperation mode, right?
Nope.
They're not trying to be like, all right, we need a shake up, big shake up, blah blah blah. They're in a good spot. They're trying to get to a great spot basically. And so you look at the roster, I look at the cap sheet, and I see what are the players that realistically right now are not helping us win and is not going to be playing that much, or doesn't seem like they're going to be great contributors come the playoffs. And so you look at the top six or top six or so, like no, everyone, yes, they have their flaws, but they're pretty much there. I mean, Ant's not going anywhere, Rudy's not going anywhere, Julius is the way he's playing is most likely not going anywhere. Again, Bart, there's no great player that's available. Shout out Giannis, who's not apparently available right now. Jaden McDaniel should not be available. Nas Reed should not be available. Dante is on a great contract, and he didn't have a great
I
shooting
don't.
night, but again,
I think Dante's pretty much untouchable.
yeah, yeah, and I think just the role that he's playing right now is we need his shooting. And then you look at the next two contract. I'm going by contract size. The
Mm-hmm.
next two up are Mike Conley and Rob Dillingham, and those are two you look at. It's like, hey, are they bringing anything? And look, I love Mike Conley. I wish if I had an unborn son, I would want him to play basketball like Mike Conley. Like that's what I would want him to do. I would like him to be a Mike Conley. Everything on and off the court. But the fact of the matter is that right now, Mike looks a little bit cooked. Every time when he goes up for a floater, he's in the paint. I get nervous. I'm like, no, like I don't think it's going to end well. He still has nights that he can hit the three, that he can, make some wily veteran plays. But that's someone that you kind of want to cut bait on. Same with, Rob Dillingham. Yohan, most likely not going anywhere. TJ, they could potentially cut, but he's injured. They had plans for him. It's kind of, he's not going to net much.
He doesn't make enough.
Yeah, he doesn't
if
make
Shannon
enough.
made more money, that would his contract would be helpful.
Right.
But like you're just better off
He's a filler.
holding on to him.
Yeah.
And you have guys like Leonard Miller or Joe Ingles that if you need an extra 2.5 million to go out in the trade, like those are the players that should be outgoing.
Well, exactly, right. And so that's where I'm getting to is that, okay, so Bones, again, he's fine at where he's at in a minimum. Joe Ingles, he's fine as a minimum. I think Joe and Mike are both kind of bring the same type of locker room type of presence, type of thing where it's a little bit redundant. And then Jalen Clark, again, he's not a guy that we're trying to move on the type of contract he's at right now. And so when you look at it, there's really three players that stand out. There's Mike Conley at 10, Rob at 6.5, and then there's, I would say, probably Leonard Miller, who's kind of next up in that Josh Minot, Luka Garza cutting block, making 2.2, which again is a filler. So you add those three together, you're looking at about $18 million that the Wolves could potentially ship out. And then I think where there's smoke, there's fire sometimes. And I know John Krasinski, who does a great job. I never really question his reporting. I said that, there's nothing that's super imminent. But, I have heard from some, sources that, Malik Monk is for sure a guy the Wolves are looking at. And same with Colin Sexton as well, too. And again, I know they're not going to be perfect players. I know that there's a reason why they may be available even for trade. But those are two guys that I both really liked in high school. I really followed them in their senior years where I'm like, dude, like they really kind of had a late ascension. I like them both in college. Again, they're type of those exciting players that will kind of get the crowd on their feet, that are kind of energizer bunnies, like kind of lightning bolts type of things. And they both have a spotty track record in terms of, how they're contributing to winning. I think there's a stat out there that Colin Sexton is one of the worst players in terms of plus minus of all active NBA players, in their career so far. And Harvey's just been in the teams that he's been on. But yeah, I think, both of those two guys make exactly 18 million and change, like just under 19 million a year right now. And the trade machines say that those three of Rob, Mike, and Lenny would work almost, even given where we're at with the salary cap, that or with the aprons, that it will work for Monk or for Sexton. Now, I would hesitantly pull the trigger on that. If I had to pick between the two, I'd probably say maybe a Malik Monk, because I think it's a little bit more beneficial for maybe what the Wolves need. I mean, I think Malik Monk is like, if you get a good Bones Highland at his peak a little bit more. He offers that perimeter shooting, secondary creator, that type of thing. Again, I do think that he can contribute to the Wolves. The thing is, he is on the books for 2 more years after this. I think he has another year at 20 million, and then a player option after that around the same amount. And I would be sad. I really want Rob to work out, but it's very clearly not working, and it's getting worse. I mean, like you said, I love Johnny Juzang. I think he's great, but he is a two-way player that's really kind of a one-way player on the scoring end as far as his career right now. And he got minutes over Rob Dillingham, which is kind of like indicative. And then
Mm-hmm.
Mike, same thing. I love Mike. I think he deserves better than getting sent off to Charlotte or Sacramento. But hopefully he get bought out and maybe, go back to Memphis, retire there, or whatever the case is. But yeah, those are the two players I think are, money wise, when it makes sense with what the Wolves could be willing to kind of shave off in terms of players aren't really contributing right now. But I have my questions about that as well.
Yeah, I think you laid it out pretty good. They're not going to trade the top 6 guys. They're starters plus Nadas Reed. They're playing their team is too good. They're playing too well to make a big trade like that. Like I don't think that's smart. So like I mentioned, if you can obviously trade if you and then if you're unwilling to trade Mike for obvious reasons, and you're unwilling to trade Rob because his value is low, then you're just not really making an addition then, other than a minimum, or you're getting a buyout guy, which obviously could help, but like you're not making a big addition. So like you mentioned, there's kind of two routes. If you are making an addition, just trading Rob plus Leonard Miller or Joe Ingles to get to like the $8 million number, or if you're willing to trade Mike, which once they come back home, maybe I'll do some poking around with people to see if it might just be a non-starter trading Mike, and I would get it. It makes sense. But if you are willing to trade Mike, I do think Malik Monk and Colin Sexton's names make sense. The difference there, and we could probably break down who we believe is like the better player, quote unquote. Let me make sure that Sexton, yeah, both guys make. Malik Monk has more money on his contract after the season, where Sexton is a straight up free agent after this season. I'm not sure which one you'd in that case, I'd probably lean towards Sexton. I would probably value the expiring contract. I don't necessarily want to play Malik Monk $20 million next year. That's probably what I would say. If I do some quick math, so they'd be trading away Rob's 6.5 for Colin, for Monk's 20 million. If I can plug this in quick, see how much second apron space they would have. Yeah, so they'd cut their second apron space basically in half from 30 million to 10 million. That'd be you'd have to be pretty confident that Malik Monk, and he has a player option for 21.5 after that. So you'd have to be pretty confident, and maybe people are. You have to be pretty confident that Malik Monk would be able to give you like a 6-man type role, or like obviously he'd be like the 7th man, a solid, like a Naz Reid quality player. And I guess in Sacramento, he has not shown that this year. Now, okay, that's Sacramento. That maybe we shouldn't take anything of note from Sacramento basketball games at this point. You're Leo's Sacramento Kings. So I think the less risky move would probably be Colin Sexton. But like you mentioned, maybe you believe in Monk more. I just think like, although if you're trading Rob, and trading Rob for an expiring would obviously be a big, like, it'd be a big admission that you screwed up that pick. And obviously they've made plenty of good moves compared to bad moves. And it seems like you're going to hit a home run with this Joan Beringer pick. So maybe you picked up that value that you lost with Rob elsewhere. But yeah, I think Monk and Sexton are two good names. And maybe closer to the deadline, we'll find two buckets, which will be these 16 to 19 million dollar guys where you're trading Mike and Rob, and then the $8 million guys where it's just trading Rob, or Rob obviously plus another expiring. And then maybe we look at like potential buyout market guys, your Kyle Anderson types. But I think the bigger picture case, which we all agree, like this is largely the team who's going to go to battle in the playoffs.
Right.
And I think at this point it's hard to see that as anything else but a good thing. Let's move into Apex Alpha. I'll get mine out of the way pretty quick. I just picked Anthony Edwards. He scored 55 points. One of us had to pick him. So I did. Not much else to say there. We already talked about at length about Ant. Leo, who's your Apex Alpha?
Well, it's time to get into the meat of the podcast. My
Mm-hmm.
Apex Alpha is Joan Beringer. In this last week, in these 3 games that they've played, he's a team best plus 13, and it certainly feels like it. The way that I've kind of viewed Joan's play in these last 3 games, again, he played just a few minutes there against the Rockets. It feels really reminiscent of the beginning of TJ Shannon's run last season, where he was keeping it very simple. He came in and it was working. Not on the scouting report. Bring energy and do what you do at a high level. And again, obviously, eventually TJ's had hit some walls, and obviously he's going through his sophomore slump, if you want to call it that. Mainly with injuries. But yeah, I mean, Johan's coming in and he's just doing his thing, like he's just playing, and it's been such a breath of fresh air to see that, because we're so used to Rudy going to the bench and the rebounding caves, or second chance possessions kind of cave, all that type of stuff. And so when him and Jalen Clark are out there on the court, man, like in my notes, I just kept writing Jalen Clark saves a possession, Joan Beringer saves a possession, gets us another opportunity. And it's just so awesome to watch him play. And he's should have had a chance to tie or win the game against the Spurs or go ahead, those final seconds there. The refs made the correct call. But I mean, like, how crazy is it for him to come in and get baptism by fire? I mean, that wasn't straight the one-on-one matchup the whole time. But I mean, you get Giannis, you get to see KD a little bit, and then you get to see Victor Wembanyama. I mean, that's quite a run of it. I mean, I can't wait to see what he's going to do when the Wolves play their next game against the Utah Jazz, when he's matching up against Yusuf Nurkic. He's running circles around him, or our buddy Kevin Love, getting matched up with them. If he's still getting minutes, we haven't really heard anything. I haven't heard anything about Rudy Gobert, and he's still going to miss any extended time. The Wolves do have 2 days off, so they have this Sunday and Monday off before they play the Jazz on Tuesday. So hopefully he continues to get run. It seems like Chris Finch is into it. He's playing him for stretches at a time, and the numbers really mean the eye test. So Johan is my Apex Alpha.
Yeah, Beringer was, especially in that Milwaukee game, was incredibly, for his first real rotation minutes in the NBA, was incredibly impressive. Talked about it in the last pod, just how, like the stuff you mentioned, just keeping possessions alive. He didn't seem overwhelmed by, like, he was guarding Giannis that game. He was guarding Wemby for a lot of the Spurs game. Just didn't seem overwhelmed. Now, there was a couple, Wemby shot a 3 that he just was late to close out. There was a help defense rotation where he kind of helped off the strong side corner. Probably not there's still rough edges there, but a lot of the stuff that we thought he'd be good at, I think his hands around the rim have been great. He's had a bunch of tip-ins, just catching lobs and throwing them down, or that Jaden had a couple assists to him early in the game. I think he hit a little baby hook type shot. Like, the offensive game is there, and I think clearly he'll be a much different defender than Rudy, and obviously he won't be the quality of defender Rudy is. There might not be in the history of the NBA a defender as good as Rudy Gobert. Certainly, if there is anyone, it's a short list. But it's very easy to see. The kid is only 19 years old. Like, I get to call him a kid. Like, guy's 11 years younger than me. I get to call someone a kid, even with my baby face. But already at 19, I don't think he'll get much run in the playoffs. And there's certainly he might go back down to Iowa later. There'll certainly be some DNP CDs coming in. But, like, I think continuing to try to get him and playing with, like, the 3 big lineups that they did a little bit, and it makes it easier when I think Rudy Gobert isn't one of the 3 bigs in that lineup. It'll be interesting to see if they try those, or maybe it's better put, when Beringer is one of the 3 bigs in the lineup, I think just the defensive versatility with him make a little bit more sense than playing like Randall, Nas, and Rudy together. So I just hope they keep kind of trying to play with those matchups.
How crazy was that save that he had that Finch reviewed? I think it was second or first review that they used, where he just comes crashing in and he plays like Twister on the edge baseline to save the ball and keeps his foot around. Like, I was just thinking, like, my knees hurt watching that. Just like seeing, it's very Dennis Rodman-esque the way that he plays. He just comes flying in for rebounds. And yeah, I mean, it's just the physicality really pops, the size really pops with Joan, and I think that's something that I think I've seen when he played in the G League, but I didn't think that it would happen this fast. So
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's move into our prey of the week. Leo, who did the Wolves make their prey?
I am saying it is 2 words Wolves Pod. It is you and me, Ryan. I would say we recorded, a couple weeks ago. We, put the topic out. Is Johan ready to play rotation minutes if Rudy, behind Rudy, let alone in lieu of Rudy? And we both kind of said that, yeah, I mean, we doubted that Johan was ready to play regular rotation minutes in the NBA. We agreed that, he still needed a little bit, maybe refinement in the G League, but it's great. He's doing well there. He should be there. And if anything, he'll probably be on track for 2026-27, because I said in that little segment, which we clipped and made it into a short, was that Johan, I think, reminded me a little bit more of where we were with Rob Dillingham last year, where it's like, okay, well, maybe we'll see some flashes, but honestly, at this point, if we're focusing on winning, we probably should be prioritizing, okay, well, let's get Johan minutes because he's not ready. When in reality, we've seen in this last 3 games that he's kind of more on a TJ run, like I just said, where it's like he's playing and he's effective in his minutes right now. So maybe he should be getting more minutes. So I'll happily eat crow on that. Like I said earlier, if you told me that Giannis and Wemby was going to be his 2 primary assignments in his first 2 to 3 games, I would have felt pretty good about what our thoughts were. It's like, yeah, it's going to be rough for Johan, but we were wrong. That said, I will come with the caveat that he was one of the 2 big men that I highlighted prior to the 2025 NBA draft as bigs that I hope that Tim Connolly would look at with their first round pick at 17. And luckily they did pick Johan, and he's panning out pretty well right now. And again, not even 20 years old. 2 words Wolves Pod. I think we were a little bit wrong on that one.
Yeah, hard to say anything else. We didn't think he'd be ready to play, and it's clear that he is, while obviously pointing out the rough edges that by the time he's 20, 21, 22 will be far lesser.
Yeah, Ryan, that's why we're podcasting and we're not Tim Connolly and not running an NBA team.
True.
So,
Very true. All right, the team that the Wolves made their prey, I had the Bucks. Talked about it already, but it's time for them to let go of Giannis. I know it's tough. They went 40 years between Kareem and Giannis, and those you might go 40 years again between players of that caliber. I get how difficult it is. I thought it made sense for them not to trade him this last offseason because of how bad the East is, but it's clear they're not even close to good enough. And I think even though it's going to be a tough at least like 4 or 5 years for the Bucks, I think it's just time to try to maximize your Giannis return. And the Wolves, they lost to the Nuggets without their top 2 guys, and they lost to the Wolves by just an incredible amount without and Rudy. I don't know. It's just time. But let's move into the Western Conference standing update quick. Nuggets lost to the Hornets tonight, which was helpful. The Nuggets just keep winning ball games without their guys. It's fairly impressive. Although I will mention that they by far have the hardest remaining schedule in the NBA, but like a wide margin. A lot of that is playing the Nuggets or the Thunder still 4 times, but still like their schedule is incredibly hard, and it's not just who they play. Like just if you add up the wins and losses for all their opponents, it's by far the hardest, but they have 8 back-to-backs left. Compare that with the Wolves, who have the fewest with 6. They have 2 more than the Wolves at 8. And I wrote this down. The number of games they have a rest advantage compared to rest disadvantage, they're -5. They had 5 more games where they're at a rest disadvantage compared to advantage. The Rockets are the same thing. The Rockets have -5 in that stat. They have 10 back-to-backs. They've played 4 fewer games than the Wolves. Like the Rockets' schedule has been crazy to start. And then the Spurs have a bunch of rest disadvantage games, while also having 8 back-to-backs. Like the Wolves' schedule is the easiest. Like Houston plays easier opponents, but their travel schedule and their back-to-back schedule is much harder. San Antonio is basically neck and neck with the Wolves in terms of opponent. But again, more back-to-backs, more rest disadvantage games. The Wolves just have they have a much easier schedule than they seems, and they're playing as good as the rest of them, sans OKC. I just think I'm looking forward, if there is like a potential gaming of the seeds, getting up to the 2 seed would be incredibly valuable, and it's possible. They're only a half game behind Denver, who has the tiebreaker on them. They're like a game and a half behind San Antonio, who the Wolves have the tiebreaker. Um, and getting to that 2 seed, and then if you can get really lucky and have Denver slip to 4 where San Antonio's the 3, I think that would be the ideal. But ultimately, it I think the Wolves most likely will finish in the top 4, but obviously they got to go out there and earn that.
Yeah, I think you point out a lot of the main points there. I think I agree with you. I was looking at the standings, and the Wolves really should be shooting for that 2-3 seed. I think it's very doable. You look at the standings right now. I mean, the second seed Spurs right now are 5.5 games back, and we're 8 games back. The Rockets are right there, just half a game behind us as well too. And the Lakers, yeah, technically, they're 1 game behind us at 9 games back, but I don't the Lakers also just got sandblasted by the Hornets the other day. They beat a Raptors team that was missing some players today. But shout out the Hornets, like you said. I mean, yeah, they beat the Lakers, they crushed them, and then they go to Denver and they crushed Denver as well too. The zombie Nuggets just seem to keep plugging away, and so yeah, I think a top 2 or 3 seed really should be the goal here. So we really got to keep an eye on the standings. I mean, it's so early; we're just past the
Mhm.
halfway point, so it's going to change a lot, obviously. So I don't want to live and die with every single game. But yeah, I think the Nuggets and Spurs, we really got to pay attention to them right now because I don't think the Rockets and Lakers are going to be moving that much further up or going to be any type of a threat. So yeah, it's going to be all about. I think we know this, right? I mean, the Wolves have been to 2 straight Western Conference Finals. It's going to be about matchups and who they're going to play, and I think it's super important. Yeah, like you said, in an ideal world, the Nuggets play the Thunder in the second round of the playoffs, or one of them get knocked off before the Wolves even have to see them. So that's the best case scenario. But even then, the way the Wolves are playing right now, despite being a little bit shorthanded and banged up, I feel confident about them against pretty much any team not named the Thunder right now.
Yeah, I would probably I think the Nuggets are kind of closer to the okay. If we're doing tiers, I think to start the season, I would probably put OKC and Denver in the same tier. And then for me, I think in the just West teams, I think the Wolves are kind of in a tier by themselves next, and then probably no, San Antonio's in the same tier as the
Yeah,
Wolves.
I'd say.
I would say, and then Houston by themselves, Laker by themselves. Lakers might be closer to Phoenix at this point.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that's kind of how I see it. And so if you can get up to really, it's just and there's a good chance even if you're the second seed and you get the Nuggets as like your 3 seed next to you, like is that honestly is not much different than if the Wolves are the 4 seed. Like
Right.
you're gonna get as a second seed, you get a slightly easier first round matchup. But like I'm not sure the Wolves' chances to beat the Nuggets compared to the Thunder in the second round. I don't. It's gonna be pretty similar. So really, if you can somehow get the Nuggets to face OKC in the second round, that's your dream scenario, I think. But ultimately, you don't really have control over that because
Right.
if the Nuggets finish, even if you pass the Nuggets, if the Nuggets finish ahead of everyone else besides the Wolves and OKC, there's if both the Thunder and the Nuggets are top 3 seeds, there's no way to get them to face each other before the West Finals. So it's kind of like there's nothing you can really do.
Well, then at that point, you look at, well, the Spurs would be the 4 seed and they'd be the ones playing the Thunder. And, I know that the playoffs are different. It's a long season, but I mean, you kind of like if you had to pick one team to have to play the Thunder in a series, I mean, I think Nuggets or the Spurs would be great teams that they'd have to face in the second round if it's not us. So, yeah, either way, I think there's an opportunity, there's a road. And yeah, I think that's kind of what Ryan and I have both been saying is that, there is, if not a small window, but a door open for the Wolves to make a run and actually try to win a championship this year. They won't be the favorites, but there is a path to it for sure.
Yeah, and if you keep, I don't know what, there's no use trying to find this number, whatever their title odds are, 5%, 10%, it's probably in that general vicinity. If you keep stacking those odds and you just try to you try to hit it, you try to get lucky, you try to grab a blackjack metaphor, you try to draw to 21.
Yeah.
You might have 14 and a 10 might come up and you bust, but you just hope one day the 7 comes and you draw to 21, right?
Yeah, you just want to be at the table. We talked about this.
Yeah.
I think maybe a month or two ago, where it's like anything can happen in the playoffs, and you never want to root for injury. But this is not 2K. Injuries are not turned off, and things do happen. I think I talked about it last time, where it was the 2019 NBA playoffs, I think, where the Raptors beat the Warriors or whatever it was, where it's like, yeah, I mean,
Yep.
the Warriors' limbs completely just fell apart by the end. And, the Raptors ended up winning because they went all in on this, securing Kawhi Leonard for on a 1 year rental. Like, what were the chances of that actually happening, of them getting Kawhi and them actually getting, beating the Sixers, in game 7, on a crazy 4 bounce jump shot, and then going on to play the Warriors, who lose Kevin Durant and lose Klay Thompson in the series and end up winning, right? So, crazier things have happened. So, I don't think it's worthy of thinking, oh, well, the Wolves, yeah, they're not really going to have a shot to win, but let's just see how far they go. It's like, no, I mean, we could. Anything could happen. You just want to be at the table with the best odds possible. Exactly.
Exactly. Kind of in this vein, my 2 words to close out the pod are no worries. Um, the Wolves lose back-to-back nights. Obviously, that's not ideal, but also, like, it also kind of doesn't matter, and it does matter. Um, but like there's a time in not too distant, like 2 seasons ago with the Rudy season, even last year, at a lot of the times where these back-to-back losses would just be like, where are we going? What are we doing? How are we going to recover from this? Certainly, like you think about the Jimmy Butler season, they were 1 game, they made the playoffs by 1 game. Last year, they avoided the play-in by 1 game. Like I mentioned, the Rudy Gobert team, they're a game away from avoiding the play-in. I just think this year they've already. I'd be really surprised if the Wolves didn't make the top 6, and we're inching closer towards. I'd be pretty surprised if the Wolves weren't in the top 4, and which is kind of incredible to say because like I would not have said that specifically on New Year's Eve in Atlanta, certainly. Um, but it's just like, and also you just watch the games. Like they lose to Houston on the road without their best player by 5. It's hard to you lose a game, like I mentioned, 22 and a half hours after that game where Lenny Miller and Johnny Juzang play rotation minutes. It stinks that they lost, but like I already mentioned, the schedule opens up. Just start beating the teams. If they just start beating the teams you're supposed to at a 90% rate or whatever, and you win the other tough games win half of them, you're going to win 50 something plus games and be a top 4 seed. So, the losses are annoying, or especially because it felt like they could have had one or both of those last 2 losses, but um, incredibly fun games like that. I think that's almost the like we're just enjoy it. I think is also like a 2 words you could have. Like it's been fun.
Yeah, my 2 words are similar to you. I agree with you on pretty much everything. The Rockets game, I feel like to me was a little less fun. It was a long game.
Sure.
There's a lot of stoppages in that game. But no, yeah, my 2 words are still confident. We've talked about this earlier. The Wolves, I feel like, have shown me something during the 7 game stretch. We talked about this. It was right after they had creamed the Wizards. They're like, all right, it's like I said, I think it was midterms time. The Wolves have 7 teams that are above 500, or you have like the Giannis Bucks are kind of desperate right now. We'll see who the Wolves are, and I think they showed me something. I mean, it was tougher opponents, and you look at the record and you say, oh well, 4-3. I mean, how's that showing you anything? But I mean, the matinee loss to Cleveland on that, that 2nd game of the series was like the only real clunker where they just like didn't look good, didn't look ready, and they got smashed. But they creamed the Heat, they creamed the Cavs in the first game, and they creamed the Bucks. So those are 3 games where it's like, dude, they won. Like basically blew those teams out. And then they had that really impressive comeback against the Spurs where they were basically, dead in the water. I think it was down 19 or whatever it was. And then he lost again, as we know, we talked about shorthanded against the Rockets, shorthanded against the Spurs, even more shorthanded against the Spurs. We didn't really talk about the Nas Reed injury. I don't think I really saw an update on that. But I mean, those were both health disadvantages and rest disadvantages that they came into, or at least in the Spurs, rest disadvantage. And so, I think as long as, they get healthy, I think that's going to be the most important thing right now moving forward, because again, health really kind of is the first and most important thing, and where the Wolves are going to end up, or any team is. And so I think if they need to get their health back up, hopefully Rudy's not out too long. Hopefully Nas Reed, that it was really weird when I told you I was watching that game with my brother, and I saw it and I like paused the game. I was like, what happened there? And he's like, wait, what are you talking about? I rewinded it on my DVR, and it was, I think someone on the Spurs was shooting free throws, and you see the camera on Nas Reed just kind of he's standing outside the 3-point line. He's kind of like touching his shoulder, and and then he keels over like, ow, like something really wrong. I was like, what was that? That was weird. And then shortly after he comes out, he doesn't come back in. And so I don't know how serious that is right now. I don't know if you've heard anything about it, but hopefully they get healthy. Despite that, I am still confident the Wolves do have a more favorable schedule coming up after the tough stretch that they just had. Jazz, Bulls, and then the Warriors twice in a row. And then Mavericks, again. So that's a better 5 game stretch there than the kind of as far as strength of schedule. So still confident. Hopefully they get healthy.
Yeah, and I remember looking at the beginning of the season, and I said this then, was like, there isn't really a hard stretch. There isn't like this month-long stretch where the Wolves have like this daunting schedule. And I remember thinking, okay, there was this stretch right by Christmas where they faced OKC, Milwaukee, New York, Denver. And they went 3-1 in that stretch, which I think everyone in the world would have taken. Obviously, would have loved 4-0 if they could have closed out that Christmas game in Denver. And then there was this stretch where we'll even throw in the Miami Washington Wizards back-to-back where they face Heat, Wizards, Heat, Cavaliers, Spurs, Bucks, Rockets, Spurs. Like that is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 game stretch where possibly 8 of those were against good opponents. 7 probably downgrade the Bucks to not a good opponent. But like that's 7 quality opponents, and the Wolves went 5-2, or excuse me, 4-3, or oh my gosh, math is eluding me. 6-3.
6-3. Yeah, 6-3.
6-3. That's a solid stretch, and they were probably closer to 7-2 than they were 5-4. They had the close win against the Spurs and 2 relatively close losses against Houston and San Antonio. So they're in a good spot. They were at a 1.54 win pace. They're probably, I do the math, 50, 53, 52 with the 2 losses. But like you mentioned, they got at Utah and home Chicago. You like those to be 2 wins. And then a pair of Golden State games. 4-game stretch. 4-0, 3-1, and you're kind of back to your winning ways. Yeah, the schedule, the Wolves got through the hardest part of their entire schedule was this first half of January. Still some not the second half isn't any cupcakes, but like into February and March, they really start to get some easy games. And that's especially like around deadline time, which bad teams can improve around the deadline too. But yeah, like I mentioned, the Wolves are in a really good spot, and it'll be fun. The chase for the 2 seed will be fun, kind of similar to 2 seasons ago where they were chasing the 1 seed. Obviously, that's kind of out of play. But the chase for the 2 seed will be fun, and the stakes, I think, will be much lower. I mean, they were fairly low 2 seasons ago, but like 2 seasons ago, they had not won a playoff series since 2004, and now they've won 4 in the past 2 seasons. So like it's like it'll be all the fun of the chase without like the big stakes. If they end up the 4 seed or even the 5 seed, it won't be the end of the world. But it'll be fun to see what Ant and the boys can do.
Yeah, it seems like it was interesting. I thought back to the, I think it was media day for this season where Ant said that, oh, what are you going to do to help motivate against the bad teams? He's like, I'm going to try and go for career highs. Well, I mean, he got a career high against the 2 seed Spurs, and Victor Wembanyama kind of staring him in the face, going literally, toe to toe, basket for basket there at the end. And so, I'm excited to see, hopefully, again, Ant's toe injury is not something that flares back up. We'll see. I think I heard something, it was like a toe infection or some sorts that he's dealing with. But yeah, I think, like I mentioned earlier, health is important. But yeah, schedule wise, they can, in some, for all intents and purposes, control their own fate. They're moving forward. So hopefully they, take the opportunity, whether it's just the players on the team, but even the front office, like we said, with potential trades. I'm trying to upgrade around the 7th, 8th guy on the team type of thing spot. I think there's opportunity for sure.
Yeah, and they've already had 3 back-to-backs to start 2023, or just 2? No, three back-to-backs already to start 2026.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't have any for I guess they have one right at the end of the month too. But like again, the schedule, both with the quality of opponent and the travel of all of it, does lighten up. So that'll be fun to watch. But for Leo, I'm Ryan. Thank you everyone for listening. I'll be back later this week.
Get home and drive safe.
Go Wolves.
Ayoo!